Hello, Internet. I'm Corion, your Witch in Residence here on YouTube. I do first want to apologize for my voice. I'm just getting over a thing. So if I sound a little scratchy and crackly, I do apologize. I swear, Stephanie Genesex, I am not trying to steal your signature sound. So, Underworld, the original World of Darkness like clone that was done beautifully. Um, I really enjoy the movie. I mean, how can you not? It's Kate Beckinsale in a catsuit. But there's more to it than that because we get into some interesting questions about intergenerational conflict. We're saying vampires and werewolves, but we might as well be saying Hatfields and McCoys or Montagues and Capulets. So, with that all in mind, before we get too deep in, I would just like to say, guys, thank you so much for all those who have subscribed so far. If you haven't yet subscribed, please consider doing so. It really helps at the channel. Additionally, a like and a share really helps me get noticed by the YouTube algorithm, which honestly, right now, is the one thing holding me back from getting a message of friendship, peace, and, contemplation out to the rest of the world. So anything you can do really helps me out, really helps the channel out. Thank you very much. Now, with that obligatory ritual out of the way, let's talk about Underworld. So, the core premise of the movie is the Lycans are looking for a member of their group that is being born in and will soon awaken. And the vampires are looking for this individual too, because they are stuck in this eternal war with their enemy, the werewolves. And it's been reigning for so long, this battle between the two in the shadows of the night, that almost nobody remembers why it happened in the first place. And that to me leads to an interesting question. Intergenerational conflict. We see it, in our own lives, right? We see conflicts in Africa between tribes that probably don't even remember what their conflict is about. We see this in the Palestinian Israeli conflict where tribal disagreements have grown and accelerated over the years, taken on political tones. And because so and so's brother was killed by so and so's sister, the battle continues. We even see it now starting to become an unfortunate part of American, well, North American really politics, with battle lines being drawn between those who identify as conservative and those who identify as liberal. Part of the interesting thing in this movie, though, is two of the members of these tribes, the vampires and the werewolves, start to, I don't necessarily think fall in love, but they definitely have a connection, a human connection. When you're dealing with fantastical supernatural creatures like vampires and werewolves, a human connection, I would imagine, is quite the rare thing. But this connection, they start to realize that they're not so different. And the truth is, you know, we aren't really that different. In my own life, I've spent time among Israeli families and Palestinian families. And, I initially thought, there was going to be significant differences between the two groups. Food, turns out there really wasn't. Just really, maybe one or two spices involved, really, right? Um, Prayers, yes, to a point, but both of them were praying for the same thing, peace, right? Both of them were praying to be allowed to live and to be allowed to love as they see fit, right? So it wasn't really that. It wasn't really whether the youngest daughter would be allowed to go out dressed in a miniskirt, because as amusingly as it was, the argument occurred in both of the households that I had visited, um, that the youngest daughter was not going out dressed like that. They were a representation of this house and they were going to behave as such. It wasn't the fundraisers they were involved in, because truth be told, both the kids that I knew from both families were raising funds for their schools. You know what it was? It was a doctrinal conflict that no one could really remember the beginning of in recorded history. It was a conflict that continued on and continues on to this day, built on anger of slights that happened because of slights that happened because of slights that happened back to time immemorial. And that can be a hard thing to move away from, because the other side of the conflict is built up as such a monster by each side, right? You can't like that boy from that group because all of them are killers or monsters or worse. You can't, expect one of them to be able to love you because they're incapable of love. But that's not true. We're all people. We all change. We all have the pieces to be good, to be kind, to be loving to one another, um, to argue, to get in fights, to get over them, to forgive. But when there's that much blood, when there's that much anger and hate on either side, it can be very difficult to see that. And it can be very challenging for those involved to be able to realize that. Um, some some hatreds are very hard to let go of. And I have found that at times hatred can feel like a comfortable old leather jacket. It's warm and it's inviting and it envelops you and it's familiar. But we have to remember when it's time to let go of that, when it's time to give the other side an opportunity to be human and let them see you as a human. I am not saying that the road to peace is easy. I am not saying that the road to peace between conflicting sides isn't unbelievably challenging with components and equations and calculations that need to be made by both sides. But it starts by the youngest generation deciding that the conflicts of old do not have to be revisited upon the young. It starts by saying, I'm not going to hate someone because of who I believe they are to be. If I'm going to be angry at somebody, I'm going to get to know them, to choose to understand them before I do that. And that's a challenge. That takes reevaluating positions that have been reinforced by philosophy, by familial ties, by every major get together, people recounting the horrors that have happened to them. And that's a hard thing to realize, that that's what's happening, that generational indoctrination is occurring. And it sounds rough to hear it that way. And I can understand if somebody just said, he doesn't know what he's talking about. His family was not involved. It's not his family. And you're right. It wasn't my family. It hasn't been my family ever. My family has been involved in has their own bag of hammers and things that they've had to deal with. But I realized that I needed, as a responsibility to the future generations, to reevaluate each one of those hammers as I pick it up and look at it and decide for myself whether it's worth putting that hammer in the next generation's hands, or whether it would be better to say, this is what I've learned. This is what I understand. It's up to you to make those decisions, but don't make them yet. Do some research. Do some work. Do some math. Make your own decision. And this can be hard. Older generations can see this as a betrayal of what they believe to be core to their traditions and to their beliefs. But I would say this to these older generations. because you taught me to love, because you taught me to care, because you taught me to be a good person, I can't be a good person to only selected people. I have to be a good person to those that I feel are worthy of that goodness. I have to be willing to do that work, even if sometimes it might hurt. Because at the end of the day, that's the only way we move forward. And even on the conservative side of the equation, where you're taught to honor family values, well, if your family values are love and respect, then by doing this, you are showing respect to those values. As the Bible states, honor thy father and thy mother, yes, but honor all the lessons they taught, not just the letter of what they taught, but the spirit of it as well. I personally don't believe anyone here was taught to hate unequivocally everyone all the time by their parents. I would choose to believe that if you're following my channel, you've been taught in general that to try to love those that you can, try to be kind when possible, and try to reach out when a friend is hurting. Well, if that friend is your family's legacy, then it's time to reach out and try to heal that hurt. We don't heal that hurt by putting the stains of an entire other people on it. We heal that hurt by deciding not to be part of that cycle, to honor the values of goodness and light that you've been taught since you were a very young age. So I guess this is my plea. This is my ask of everyone who watches something like this, who sees a Romeo and Juliet story, who reads the lessons of the Hatfields and the McCoys, and the important part of the lesson at the end of it. Don't let yourself be the last generation holding on to old hatreds. Be the first of a generation that decided that they were tired of pain, of causing it, of receiving it, and that you would prefer to choose love instead. That to me would be the greatest legacy we could ever leave to future generations. Because as any member of the armed forces will ever teach you, the reason why they fight ultimately is so that future generations might remember and avoid their fate. No one wants to have to raise a warrior, but we should always be ready to raise someone who's willing to be a peacemaker. So that's what I've got for you guys. I bet you didn't expect this from a vehicle that showed a whole bunch of gorgeous, mid-20 people sucking blood and a bunch of other gorgeous 20 something people in, with bare shirts and rippled chests. I bet you didn't expect that deep a meaning, but watch the movie again. I think you'll find it there. I certainly did. So with that in mind, guys, thank you so much. Merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. Thank you very much, guys. Take care. Have a wonderful day.